to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I gotta tell you, the gentleman on my show was on 5 years ago, and at the time, he was in Long Island. But today, he's in Florida, and his band Foghat has a new album out called Sonic Mojo, and I really like the song A Little Bit of Everything. And my guest is Roger Earl. How you doing, Roger?
Hello, Steve. Nice to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So what are you doing in Florida? You know, I know you're living in New York. What are you doing in Florida?
We're actually our new album's coming out Friday, tomorrow. We've been working on it for the last couple of months. Actually, we're doing it down in Florida at our studio in DeLand, and we're relearning the album because we're going to be playing about 8 songs from the new album. And we're doing a show on Sunday, the 12th, at the Iridium in Manhattan, the Iridium Club. And then the following Friday, I think it is, the 17th, we're playing in San Juan Capistrano at the Coach House, and we're having a record release party. So we're playing, I think, 7 or 8 of the songs from the new album, and we'll be playing a couple of classic Foghat tunes and a couple of songs we haven't played in years, just because we've been having fun all week with relearning songs and talking about what we want to play. So it's a party. I love a party.
I do too, and I'm going to tell you, the album, what made you decide to come out with a new album? Because, you could rest on your laurels, and you could go out and just play Foghat, and people would love it, and they'd be like, oh, we love this band, and you have the big hits. But what made you to come out with a new album? I know it's 12 or 13 songs, and what made you decide to sit there at this point and say, you know what, Foghat needs a new album? I know you came out with it a few years ago, but what made you come out with this?
We're always working on a record because we have our own studio down in Florida. So January, February, March, we usually come down south. I live in New York. The rest of the guys in the band Scott lives in Nashville, and Brian and Rodney live down here in Florida. But we get together because it's cold up in New York, and I become a snowbird. I like it down here. And we just sit in the studio. It's a 4-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere, got on 10 acres. We can make as much noise, and what we do is just get the juices flowing again. We just jam for hours on end. And Brian Bassett, our lead and slide guitar player, he's the bright one in the band. He's also our engineer and producer. So if we start working on songs, which is when we do it, I'll either bring some lyrics or some ideas. Scott will have some songs he's working on. Rodney may, and Brian will have some riffs that we've collected over the year, being out on the road. And we just get together and start playing. It's, you know what? I love the recording process and love sitting down with the band and just jamming and working on stuff. And the reason I got into playing in the first place is because I love to play in a band. It gets boring sitting down working on rudiments and stuff. So you have to do that. But playing with the band, that's the fun part, when you're making music and being creative together. And that's the reason we do it. Our last album was 7 years ago. This is our 17th studio album. So we have a lot of material to pick from. So we try to pick one from each sort of, not only we couldn't actually, that would put us up to about 5 hours a night. I don't think I could do that. I'm good for about 3 or 4 hours in the studio, and then it's like, excuse me, I'm getting a little tired here, because it is still a rock and roll band. But no, I'm really happy with the new album. I love the way it feels. I love the way the songs come together, and playing with this band is just tons of fun. These guys are great.
How did you assemble this band? Because as you said, you've been in Foghat over 50 years, so it's and there's been different lineup changes, and life happens. But how did you come up with this current lineup? And it sounds like you all have a really good relationship because you can just hang out and jam. It just seems like it's very organic.
It is very. That's a good term, actually. Well, Brian Bassett, our lead and slide player and engineer and producer, has been with us, 27 years almost. He's played, with Lonesome Dave. He's played with Rob Price. So, he's been part of this band for a long time. He was also in Molly Hatchet, 1976. Play that funky music, wild boy. And about 7 years ago, we started on this record, and it's just fun. And Scott Holt, I first met Scott in 2014. He came down to the studio to play with us. Everybody has like I say stand-in. What's the other word for us? Understudy. The thing is, when you book dates, we book between 60 and 70 dates a year. If something comes up, somebody gets ill, or somebody has to have a procedure, it happens. And instead of cancelling the show, which then everybody loses out, especially the promoters, they send half the money up front so we can get our plane tickets and all that stuff. But more importantly, people, buy tickets in advance. And if you cancel the show, promoters trying to send the money back or the ticket agencies, it's just a nightmare. It's happened once or twice with us. So what we do is we have an understudy. I have two drummers who would sit in for me if I need them. It only happened twice. First time when I broke my back about how many years ago? 15 years ago. Bobby Rondinelli sat in for me for about 10 shows because the shows were booked. And the flights are booked. Brian Bassett has an understudy. Matt Baranti is his understudy. Great lead and side guitar player. Plays with a Allman Brothers band in Pittsburgh. And Rodney O'Quinn. Well, we don't have an understudy for him. Well, he's only 56. I mean, he should make it anyway. Here we have a guy called Dan Waters, who's an incredible musician, plays great bass player, piano player, guitar, a great singer. And Brian, me, is that everybody we covered? Scott. We don't have one for Scott. But if he gets ill, we're screwed. So, but he's only, 57, isn't he? Something like that. He's a kid. So, that assembling the band, what happened, how it really came about was, the last studio album we did was Under the Influence, the previous studio album. And it was a double album, vinyl, and we were about 3 or 4 songs short for a double album. There was, we can get a certain amount of songs on each vinyl. And Tom Hambridge was our producer. He came down to our studio down here, and we finished the album in Nashville. But what happened was, when we were writing the songs for the album, we were about 3 songs short for an album. So Scott came down, and instead of writing 3 songs, typical band, we wrote 17. 4 of those songs went on the Under the Influence album, and Scott Holt became we put a band together called Earl and the Agitators. We had all these songs, and we made another CD as well. So Scott's been with us peripherally since then, and he's an incredible musician, great singer. He played with Buddy Guy for 10 years, and he joined us 2 years ago, joined the band officially. Charlie Hune sent an email to our manager, Linda, and said that he wouldn't be coming for rehearsals, which was 3 days away before we were about to go on tour again. He's retiring. And we all went, oh, shit. But fortunately, Scott was in the room, and we were writing some songs together. And I looked at him, I said, you want to be the singer in Foghat? He said, ah! So within 3 days, he was learning. He already knew a number of the songs anyway, But that was when he joined the band, and we did our first date, I think, 10 days later. We went on a cruise, and Scott is now the official lead singer in Foghat, and lead guitar, and Rodney O'Quinn, our bass player, sings a couple of songs as well. He's got a great voice. So we have two great lead singers. Brian Bassett has a great voice, but trying to get him to sing, he's very, very quiet and laid back. He likes to just he's into his slide and guitar, and he's the bright one in the band. Without him, we couldn't do anything. So that's basically how the band came together.
Now the album. Tell me about the title, Sonic Mojo, because it's something. Mojo, I always think is like someone's cool. They got something going. I got the mojo. And Sonic seems like, I'm powerful. Boom, Sonic boom. Tell me about the title and why'd you choose that title? Because it is catchy, which is great.
Good. I think Scott came up with mojo, and I believe our manager maybe came up with the word Sonic. I'm going to read it to you. Sonic, a frequency within the audibility range of the human ear of waves and vibrations. I like that. Mojo, a charm or amulet thought to have magic powers. Yeah, that had a certain ring of truth for this band in it, and I know, it seems to work. Hold on, I've got it.
All right, see that? That's good. Now, here's a question for you, because you had the album, and I grew up as a kid buying albums. You ride my bike to the album record store when you heard something, you'd buy it, and you'd look at it, and you'd smell it, and you'd read it, and you'd look at the tracks, and you came out with the album. Who decided the track order? Because this music is very different. There's a little bit of countryist, there's a little bit of like a ZZ Top soundish a little bit, there's some 80s some sound. It's got a lot of different songs. How did you decide what order to put them in? Because it keeps you, you don't digress. It's not like boom, boom. It's good. But who decided what order you guys were putting these in?
Everybody in the band. Once we decided on what songs were going on the album, the tracking was done by everybody. Brian, Rodney, Scott, and myself, and Linda, of course, our manager. We all took it home and wrote things down. And the interesting thing is, we all came really, really close. We decided on what was going to be the first one. We decided on what was going to be the last one, and then all the songs in between. They all everybody went, yeah, that'll work. I remember Scott called me up one time. He was out driving in his truck, listening to it, had it blasting. I said, I can't hear you, Scott. You got the music on. He said, oh, right. He turned it down. But it was everybody did. Everybody picked it. The songs, all the songs in this album reflect the musical taste of everybody in the band. We're, I can't say it. It's American music. It's the blues. Then you get jazz. You got bebop, rock and roll, country and western, gospel music. This band has all those parts of it in our DNA. That's the music we grew up with, we listened to, we absorbed every bit of it. And I think this album, especially this album, reflects all those musical flavors that are in our blood. It's I know sometimes when I'm on the road I'm scrolling through. I love Tom Petty's station. I listen to Tom Petty's station quite a bit, and deep tracks and all that stuff. And occasionally I'll find a gospel music station, and this music is just fantastic. And that also, a lot of that stems from blues. A lot of the way it's formulated comes from blues music, and just it's American music over here in America. America has given music to the world. We have all these wonderful amalgamations and conglomerations of jazz, blues, rock and roll, gospel, country, hillbilly, folk music, and it all comes together as American music. This country gave music to the world, and I think, and it did. The whole world, even to this day, the whole world, listens to American music and what comes out of this land, because we have all these wonderful influences of everybody who moved here. Some people think it was the Beatles. The Beatles listened to American music. The Stones grew up listening to American music. I did. And it's one of the reasons I live here, because as far as I'm concerned, this is my home, and this is where music for me was born, and I just gravitated to it. And I love my adopted home.
Now, what made you pick up the drums? When did you start playing music? Because you've had a very long career and a professional career. Now, 51 years with Foghat. We don't talk about Savoy Brown, so you've had a very long career. But what made you pick up the drumsticks as a kid, or what, you had to start as a kid because you were working as a professional musician at a very young age?
I'm a noisy bastard. Ever since I was a child, I would play with knives and forks on the table, drive my poor mother crazy. I love my mum. My parents, I had really great parents. I would tap on the lampshade as a symbol. I'd do this sort of stuff. And when I was about 12, that was when I decided I wanted to play drums. My father found a drum teacher for me. I worked after school like 3 days a week, and Saturday mornings in a bakery. And so I had my own money. I mean, we weren't rich by any stretch. We lived in an attached house in southwest London, in Hounslow, where I grew up. But there was always music in our house. My father played piano, somewhat in the style of like Fat Swallow, that kind of stuff. My older brother, Colin, was an avid music listener and bought all the early Sun records, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, that all came into the house. And I'm like 12 years old. My 16-year-old brother's buying all this really cool music from the States. So that started me off on my journey. I did initially want to play piano, but as my older brother was getting really good at it, my father already played piano. And actually, my father took me to see Jerry Lee Lewis when I was about 12 or 13, somewhere around there, I can't quite remember, at a theatre in southwest London, because Dad appreciated a fine piano player. And I was never the same after that. My mother said that it addled my brain. I don't know what an addled brain is, but apparently it affected me, and that stayed with me forever. I'm a huge Jerry Lee Lewis fan. He was just a quintessential rock and roller. Without Chuck Berry, there would be no rock and roll. Without Willie Dixon, there would be no rock and roll, and all their contemporaries, of course. This is the land of music, and this is my adopted home, and this is why I live here, because you can create and make music here. Look at the band I have, I play in, I should say. I mean, all these guys are just incredible musicians, and we have a blast making music.
Now, how did Foghat originate? You started after being in Savoy Brown. So how did Foghat get started? What happened with Savoy Brown? You guys wanted to leave, or what happened? What was the starting of Foghat that's been around for so long?
Yeah, well, I auditioned. I was in a three-piece band myself. A bass player, Dave Hutchins, who was my best friend from school. Ray Dorset, who later went on to form Mungo Jerry with my brother in the summertime. They had a bunch of hits in England. Work was starting to slow. I was a commercial artist. That's how I earned a living. I was good at it too, and good money. But I wanted to play. I wanted to play music. At the time we were working maybe 2 times a week, something like that. And then it kind of slowed down. We were struggling to get any kind of work, just to play somewhere. There was an audition for a bass player and a drummer for a blues band. I answered in one of the new music bags in London, Melody Maker, I think it was. So I go there, and it's Savoy Brown. They wanted the first audition, apparently I failed, as did my friend Dave on bass. And they called me up about a month or two later and said, would you like to come back and try out again? Because the band I was in worked with the same agency that Savoy Brown was with. So I came back. I borrowed my dad's car, midday, lunchtime, had my drums in it. It was a place called the Nag's Head pub in Battersea, I think, in South London, rather. And I went out there, dragged all the drums upstairs, set them up, and started playing. Now, we played I didn't get the first audition, but they called me back. So I played for about well over 2 hours with them, learning stuff and going over songs. Then it sort of ended, like everybody started packing up. So I started packing up my drums, and they said, oh, where are you going? I said, we go back to work. I have a day job. They said, we're playing in Birmingham tonight. That's how I recall it. And that was a long time ago. But I have to tell you, playing in Savoy Brown was an absolute revelation for me. I had the time of my life. Didn't get paid much. Didn't get paid for the 5 albums that I played on. Didn't get any kind of royalties for writing or performing. Neither did Dave, even though Dave wrote a number of songs on there and collaborated on stuff. Savoy Brown was playing in San Francisco towards the end of 1970. Might have even been, 70, might have been 71, but I think it was 70. And we had a meeting with Kim and Harry, the manager. Tony Stevens got fired. Myself and Dave were told we could stay on in the band if we wanted to. Dave and I went back to my room that night with Tony, and we started working on some material. The following morning, we had breakfast with the manager, Harry, and said, look, we'll stay in the band until Kim puts a new band together, but we'll leave. We weren't getting paid. We weren't getting paid for any records. We weren't getting paid. We were earning the band was getting between $7,000 and $15,000 a night in 1970. That was a lot of money. We got £100 a week, wife and kid to keep. $100 a week, wife and kid to keep. So it wasn't lucrative, but the time had come for a change. And I think Kim also felt the same thing. You know, you can only go so far, but it was great. And then when we left, the manager blackballed us in England, told us we'd never work again in the States or in the UK. We did eventually, which was pretty weird. It wasn't Kim. Kim was always fine. And in fact, Kim and I always had I think a particularly good relationship, as did Dave with him. And in fact, we reconnected in around 1976. Kim was playing at a university near where I live, in Stony Brook University. He was playing there. So Dave and I went to see him, and we reconnected. And after the show, he came back to my house. We hung out that night and got a little, what's the term? Don't know if I can say it.
Shit-faced.
We got a little loose. Kim, I think, stayed there that night, and I don't even remember him leaving. I think he stopped drinking after that. Anyway, we had a good time. We stayed friends after that. We reconnected. And about 10 years or so ago, Savoy Brown came to the same agency that we were in, Paradise Artists. In fact, that was through Linda's help. And so Kim and I got to play together. I would sit in with them. Kim would come and sit in with Foghat. And we just reconnected. And that leads up to the fact that when Kim played on our previous studio album, Under the Influence, I invited him down to play on it. And we had a producer producing that one, Tom Hambridge, great producer, a really great musician and songwriter. And played on it, and after he played about 4 tracks, as did Scott Holt. And afterwards, after we finished recording, Kim came up to me and said, we were just hanging out talking. He said, look, I'd really like to write some songs for Foghat. And I said, that would be great, as long as you're playing guitar on them. And he smiled that wry smile and said, no problem. Unfortunately, Kim didn't get to play on it. About, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, Kim sent me 4 tracks actually, 4 songs that he'd made, and just his vocals, guitar, and I think he was playing to a click track. But they were terrific songs, and the band really liked them. But unfortunately, Kim became ill, and he passed last December. And well, I think we did a good number on the songs. We recorded 3 of them. We kept one of them back for future digestion. And I think the songs, Kim was a fantastic blues guitarist, which is something I think he would appreciate me saying, because that's what he was. He was a blues guitarist and a blues musician in every sense of the word. That was the music that inspired him from his childhood, when he was growing up, and he stayed with it all his life. No, he dabbled in rock and roll because they're related. The blues, without the blues, there would be no rock and roll. But that's basically how Sonic Mojo came about, and I'm particularly proud of the 3 songs that we wrote with Kim.
Well, okay, let's get back to Foghat real quick. When you guys went on your own, when you went on your own, did you ever think your first album went gold? Like, how do you think that happened? Because you just left the band where you weren't getting paid. Okay, you weren't getting paid, but you're working, and you're working on your craft. How does it end up, you go from being in a band where you're not getting paid to starting a new band to getting in the record, and your first 6 albums all went gold or platinum. The live album went double platinum. But how did you get that first record deal? Who recognized you? Because you already said you were going to get blackballed in London. So what happened?
On the first Savoy Brown tour that I was on, I met a guy called Tony Otita, who later became our manager. And when we left, and we became friends, I stayed at his parents' house out on Long Island, went fishing caught bluefish, and I said, this is the place for me. And we stayed friends over the years, and I would meet him. Anyway, he went to see Savoy Brown in 1973, I believe. And of course, myself, Dave, and Tony Stevens weren't there. So he called me up and said, what's going on? I said, we left the band and we're forming a new band. With that, he borrowed some money from his dad and came over to England, and he built a relationship with Albert Grossman. I think the story was that he'd interviewed with Albert Grossman for a position somewhere within Albert's record company or whatever, and he came over. We did a 6-song demo, recorded it at Abbey Road Studios, because our manager at the time was a huge Beatle fan. He probably figured it would some of the magic might rub off on us. I don't think that actually, the 5 or 6 of those songs I think did make it onto the first album, but a completely different disguise. That was because of our Dave Edmonds, who became our producer on that first album with his magic dust. Anyway, Albert Grossman, who was Bob Dylan's manager, the band's manager, Peter, Paul and Mary, Janis Joplin, he came over to England with the band, who he also managed. And he brought Todd Rundgren over, and Albert took a day off to come and see us. We rented a room below a pub in northwest London, in Islington, and he came down to see us. We just the 4 of us played with our high Watson Marshalls. He visibly went, oh, when we started playing. But Albert he was something else. And then I can tell this story. We finished playing. We played about 6 or 7 songs. It was probably enough to give him a headache. No, I'm just kidding. And then he said, hey, is there anywhere we can get some tea and biscuits? I said, I was familiar with the area. I said, just across the road, there's a hotel. So we went to this hotel across the road in northwest London, and we're sitting there. We ordered tea and biscuits, and we're just sitting around this table. Now, I knew who Albert Grossman was, that if he liked what he heard, this man can make things work. And tea and biscuits arrived. I think I poured some tea, and Albert used to do this thing with his cuticles. It's a very impressive man, big man, silver hair, like big long ponytail, and he said, well, hey, let's do it. It was like, I still get chills to this day when I think about, and I hear those words. And about a month or so later, he sent me $10,000. I booked studio time at Rockfield in Wales, where Dave Edmunds had the night shift and Foghat had the day shift. We'd start at like midday when Dave Edmunds would finish, and we would record until Dave came into the studio at night. Same room that we were in. Dave was mixing an album or records. And anyway, our songs were okay, but they didn't sound... We would listen to Dave Edmunds stuff, and there was magic in the air when his music was pushing the speakers. When we put our stuff on, it just sounded a bit... I was going to say lame, but it's not lame. Bit tame, I think, is a better term. Because we needed a helping hand. We weren't producers. We could play and we could write and we could put stuff together, but we needed to know how to produce a record and make it sound great. So our manager asked Dave Edmunds if he would produce Foghat, because we became, we knew each other by this time. And Dave said, well, I got to finish my record, but yeah, when I've finished, I'll help you guys out. And he gave us a helping hand. A number of people did on that record. There was a number of people we thanked on the record who played on it and gave us a helping hand. But I also know that without Dave Edmunds' input and producing that album, I don't think Foghat's first album would have been anywhere near as successful as it was. In fact, I know that. Dave Edmunds, as far as I'm concerned, is a fucking genius. And he's just a brilliant musician and producer. And I thank him on a regular basis. In fact, they just re-released our first album, I think. What label? Cherry Red Records. They released it. I think I did some liner notes on it as well. So that's where it started. So
then what happened?
Thank you, Albert.
You guys start getting bigger and bigger. And what is that like? I mean, once again, it's not like today. Like, you guys were coming out with an album every year. I mean, that's what I tell people. It's amazing. Back in the day, bands, and as listeners, we'd expect that. If there was an album, if it was a year ago, what the hell's wrong? We didn't get a new album. But you have a streak of these big sellers. What was it? What was the magic? Was it just, was it that they're great songs, but what do you think kept you guys with that momentum? Because you said gold, platinum, gold. I mean, what was it?
Well, we'd had, when we left Savoy Brown, we had a year and a half or two, I call it wandering in the abyss of being out of work and wondering, how we're going to make this work. When you do get your shot and your chance, certainly myself and the early band, especially myself and Lonesome Dave, we grabbed it with both hands, and me with hands and feet. We played anywhere and everywhere. We didn't stop to take time off to do this or do that. We wanted to play. I think the first tour I was in the States for about 13 months. And by the time I got home, my daughter was walking, and it was like, Who's that man in bed with you, Mummy? It's your daddy. Oh. And even throughout our career, certainly myself and Dave was like that. We loved to play. It was the magic of getting on stage, turning around, kicking the pedals and hitting sticks. It was just, I love what I do. And the current band is an absolute joy to play with. We are a band in every sense of the word. We we play together, we look at each other, we grin, we laugh, we have fun with it. And it was that way with Dave as well when he was alive. I enjoyed working with Dave and playing with Dave. Dave would always come on stage and give it 110%. When you play with somebody like that, it just makes it so much easier and more fun. And with the current band, it's the same. We go on stage and we all give it 110. We give it everything you've got because tomorrow might be too late. And we're a rock and roll band that's steeped in the blues, and I love playing that music. I like playing this music. We have 17 studio albums under our belt, so we have a lot of material to pick from when we go on the road.
Well, tell me about the song "Slow Ride," because that's an iconic song. That's one of the songs. Where did that come from? Because it's a longer song, but I just, whenever you hear that, when I'm driving, there's certain songs when you're driving and you hear it. It's just like if you hear Frankenstein by Winters, you crank it because it's just the beginning. Yours, did you guys know that was going to be such a magical song when you were creating it?
Myself, not when we were actually recording it and when we first started writing it. It came. Nick Jameson just joined the band. I'd asked him if he wanted to play in the band. He joined us. Rod Price and I had a house in Long Island that we had the basement soundproofed, and I was living up in Woodstock at the time, and Nick and I came down. We set up in the basement and started playing Slow Ride. The music came first. Then Dave said, I've got some lyrics that will fit with that. Nick Jameson arranged the whole song, arranged all the breaks, the drum and bass break, and the way that the song was formulated. And of course, speeding it up at the end was mine and Nick's idea, I think. Love to play fast. Anyway, we finished making the Fall for the City album, which it was on. Nick and I were coming back from Sharon, Vermont, where we recorded the album, and we'd mixed the single, which was Slow Ride, and on the B-side was another song, Save Your Lovin', because this is the one time that I recall, other than the first album, where the band said, this is the single. So we went to see Paul Fishkin, who was the head of Bearsville Records at Bearsville, and we played him Slow Ride, which was nearly 8 minutes long. And Paul Fishkin said, you can't put an 8-minute single out. And we said, myself and Nick Jameson said, yes, you can, and this is what we're doing. We did put it out. DJs and radio stations back then, some of them were fine with 8 minutes, but a lot of them would fade it out. We didn't want to edit it, but eventually Nick Jameson re-edited it down to about 4 minutes, I think, or 4.5 minutes, which seemed a bit more acceptable. But that was one of the few times that the band said, this is the song. And it was Nick Jameson and myself who pulled the plug on maybe putting anything else out. That was it. That was the single. And I love playing that song to this day. It's a riot. And
it's one of those things that just people know it. Everyone knows that song. Now the live album, a lot of people, that's where a lot of people, back then, people would find artists they didn't really know that much about. Like a young kid would hear some songs and their brother would put on a live album. Who decided to bring out the live album? And then that album just blew up. And where did you record? Was it recorded at different places or it all was in one concert?
Nick Jameson had left the band a couple of years before. Craig McGregor was now our resident bass player. He was my brother by a different mother. Craig and I were really, really tight as a rhythm section. And as friends, we would hang out and listen to music, bass and drums, like that. And we finished, I think, doing the what was the song we did over in Connecticut? Night Shift album. And we were making one record a year, an album a year. That was our deal with Bearsville Records. I think Rod and Dave were struggling to write songs. We were playing, 5 days or 6, 7 days a week anyway. And I would get cassettes from shows each night from our front of house engineer, Bob Coffey, great engineer and a good friend, still is. And I would listen to stuff. I had a boom box, a JVC boom box that was given to me by a promoter. Thank you. And I would listen to them. It was basically to try and keep an eye on like tempos and groove mates, because sometimes back then youthful exuberance would take over and songs might lose their groove and become a little too fast. We were young and full of beans, or full of something anyway. We were having too much fun out there. But that was why I was listening to it. And then I said to the band, the band's sounding great, even from these cassette plays. And we decided to do a live album. We got Nick Jamieson involved again. We rented the RCA mobile unit. We recorded, I'll have to talk to Nick one of these days, but I think we recorded at maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 shows. I'm not sure. But I do know that the songs came from Syracuse and Rochester. Those 2 shows that we were doing at the time. That's where the album came from. Now, we were playing at least an hour and a half or maybe more at the time. Why we only did a single album, I don't know. I think it might have had something to do with Warner Brothers figured maybe a single album's all it's worthwhile. But there's definitely another hour's worth of music from those shows hidden in the vaults of Warner Brothers. Now, I was out there about 7 or 8 years ago. I was at Warner Brothers because Bearsville had sold everything to Warner Brothers, which was the original parent company. And I mentioned this to somebody there, that maybe I should go down into their vaults and find the tapes and maybe get Nick Jamieson to mix the songs that didn't go on that record, because it was I think it was a classic lineup of Foghat, and we were all on fire at the time. And but they said, "Oh no, nobody can go down there." So I said, "Well, how would you know where this is?" "I don't know. Nobody's allowed down there." So maybe one day. Actually, they sent me a bunch of 2-track tapes, 5 of them, I think, that we recorded in 1973 at the warehouse in New Orleans. And they sent them to me a couple of years ago. And I had to try and go through them and pick some of the performances. But it was direct to 2-track. There was no way of mixing it or anything. But I listened to the songs. There was a bunch of songs on there that we'd never recorded before, versions of it that nobody will ever hear. And so I went through it and picked out what I thought would be the best versions of it. Like I said, sonically, it's missing. Sometimes the bass is too loud or it's not. Sometimes you don't hear the lead guitar as well as you would. And of course, 1973, there was a lot of youthful enthusiasm down in New Orleans, this place called the Warehouse. And it was recorded over 2 nights. They just sent me 4 acetates. I'm down in Florida, so I don't have them. That may be coming out in the next year or so. If somebody wants to go back to 1973 and the Warehouse when Foghat was playing, that would be the one to listen to. It's you know what it is? Making music is like a moment in time. Like with our current album, all those songs, whenever we're recording a song, we never do it more than 2 or 3 times. You rehearse it, you work out the arrangement and figure out what you're going to, or it just comes from a jam. You just go, "Well, there's a bit of magic in that. We'll keep that." And that's what it was like back then with that recording. Also, like with any live, we've done dozens of live recordings over the year. Like, since Dave passed, we've done 4 studio albums and 4 live albums. So it's like this is what we do, I'm going to keep doing it into a day I depart. And Warner Brothers, from time to time, will find stuff and say, "Rog, what do you think of this?" And I'll say, "Hey, let me listen to it." So yeah, it's music.
What is the biggest crowd you guys ever played to? I always wonder, and what's it like as a drummer? Because you have the helm, you're overseeing all. It's you, like you're on the riser. And my friend is Jason Aldean's drummer, and when he puts pictures from he'll send me pictures where it's like you're on a perch, you're on a mountain, and you see the faces. What were some of the biggest crowds you played? And do you ever sit there and go, "Holy shit, that's a big crowd"?
To be honest with you, before I go on stage, whether it's 50,000, 5,000, or 500, I get excitement. I get excited. There's like a nervous, not nervous, but real tension about going out there and playing. As soon as I get on my drum riser and I count off the first song, I'm fine. Everything is, it's like, it's the most natural place for me to be there and playing in this band. And it's always a joyous occasion. Some rooms sound better than others. Some rooms we hear each other better than others. But it's always like, there's the four of us making music and like talking to each other. That's what music's about. Actually, Brian Bassett said this one time. He said, playing music in a band is like having a conversation with the other musicians. And that's kind of what, with me, it's a loud conversation, but that's what it's about, the joy of making music. Did that answer your question? I can't remember what the question
what's
was.
the biggest crowd? Like looking back, what's the biggest people you've looked out and seen? Because I heard, after a while, you don't really see the people in the back. You just see, heads.
I can't remember probably like 50 or 200,000 people. I remember one time we did a show with the band and the Allman Brothers, and Foghat was third on the bill. That seemed to go on forever, and I think that was probably about 200,000 people. Playing stadiums. It's always great, but I have to tell you, my favorite place for playing to people is like in like a theater, like maybe anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000 or 4,000 people in a theater. That's really cool. And also occasionally we get a chance to play in a smaller room, a club that's got 500 or 600 people or 1,000 people. That's always fun. Any gig in Detroit is always a blast. That's one of my favorite cities to play, and Chicago as well. Actually, I like going to New Orleans, and LA can be fun. Boston's a really good town to play, and we're going to be playing in New York this Sunday. Oh, there again, I ramble.
No, it's fine. No, okay, so you have some shows coming up. You're playing in Atlantic City, December 9th, at the Hard Rock.
Yeah.
But now when you play, how does it make you personally feel? Because there's people who are coming to the show, and they're bringing their kids, and I'm sure some people bring their grandkids. As an artist, how does that make you feel that you've touched not just like one person, you've touched generations, and I'm sure you run into it, like you see a little kid with a Foghat shirt, and you go, "Oh man, that's me, that's me." But how does that make you feel as an artist? Because it shows that you've put an imprint, and to put an imprint on someone, to put a lasting just a fascination, or I can't even think of the word, just a lasting message. What does that make you feel like as an artist? Because you've touched generations.
This reminds me, we did a show in New Mexico this summer. It was so far, it was over 200 miles away from the airport. It was in the middle of the desert. It was for raising money for wounded warriors, and something that I feel very strongly about. I'll work with any kind of thing where it's for wounded warriors or helping children that are ill in hospitals and stuff like that. but it was Chaka or something. It was in the middle of in a desert, and there was only about, couldn't have been more than 200, 300, 400 people there. But right down the front of the audience of the show, this is in New Mexico, in the middle of nowhere, there's these two kids, probably 8, 9, 10, a little girl and a little boy. As soon as we started playing, they didn't stop dancing for an hour and a half, literally. And I kept looking at them, and like this, I had this big shit-eating grin on my face, and there was a picture of me there. It was like, when you have that effect on people, and it's really cool, especially young people, it's like, I really get a kick out of that. And then, 9 times out of 10, our audience, our Foghat fans are great. They come to have a good time. They know that they're going to hear some like rock and roll and some blues and have a good time, because that's what playing music is all about. It's entertaining people and having fun. To take you away from the maybe the drudgery of life. My life isn't drudgery. I'm one of those fortunate few that gets to play in a rock and roll band, but other people have to go to work. My work is traveling. Playing, that's fun. That's the best part of my life, making music, creating music.
Well, it's funny.
And, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I saw you with Foghat and Cloister called at the Spectrum in Philadelphia long ago. I still remember, because back then you'd save your ticket, and I was so excited because it was like such a great show. Me and my friends went, and it was just, 3 hours of just between you and them of just kick-ass rock, and that's you're right. You're the person who supplies that, and I still remember. And that's the thing. People remember concerts when you make an imprint on them.
Yeah, I mean, we've done lots of shows with Blue Oyster Cult over the years. They're a Long Island band too, and I'm really good friends with everybody in that band and everybody who's been in that band. Great band. Their manager's a total asshole, but other than that, the band, I love those guys. They're the best. We're friends, and I always enjoy. If I see a show coming up with Blue Oyster Cult, it's like, all right, we get to hang out with friends again. I'm good friends with their current drummer now, and the other guys in the band. It's like they're the best. It's and I have that relationship with a number of bands now. We just did a show with Grand Funk Railroad. I mean, I love playing with those guys. I mean, they have some fantastic songs, and they can sing. Their harmonies, it's like, where do these angels come from? And Don Brewer, I'm good friends with Don, obviously the drummer, and he plays great. The band is great. They've made some fantastic music over the years. ZZ Top, we did some big shows with them this summer. I love playing with those guys. I was hanging out backstage, and it was fun. And I got up and and watched them play. Billy Gibbons is probably one of the greatest blues guitar players ever. And I hung out backstage with him. He'd be wandering around in his pajamas. Such a cool guy, and he just loves to play. His whole thing is about making music. Has a wonderful sense of humor. They lost their bass player, but their bass player's guitar tech is now playing bass with them, and it's like they almost didn't miss a beat. The thing is, it's about the music. It's always been about the music. Some bands, don't survive if somebody passes, and I can understand that. Like maybe the band was that way. With me, I'll keep playing music until the day I can't play. I've had work done on my hands, my feet, my knees, my shoulders, and Band-Aids and glued back together, and I'm fine. I try to take care of myself. But I come back to the stage that it's about the music. It is sad when you lose people and you miss them, but you don't stop living. You mourn and you go through that phase. I remember when Dave passed. I talked to Dave about about 3 weeks, no, a couple of weeks before he passed. He was in hospital, and I got the call 8 o'clock in the morning from his daughter. Called me and said that Dad had passed, and I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to do anything with the band. I just took about 3-4 months of just, wondering. I just didn't know what to do, because Dave was a huge part of this band. But then the juices started flowing. We found Charlie Hume. He was a great singer, great guitar player, and we carried on. And then when Charlie decided to retire this year, I said, okay. Fortunately, Scott Holt was down here in the studio. We were working on some songs, and I said to Scott, "You want to be the singer in Foghat?" He said, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we go, we got to wrap it up soon. I want to ask you, though,
Yeah, no.
I always ask my guests this. When Foghat was giant, tell me a really cool story, because I love old rock and roll stories. Like Jesse Colin Young just told me how he was opening for CSNY when the night Nixon resigned, and he remembered, and he didn't know what was going on in the stadium. I love stories. Tell me a good rock and roll story to close the show out.
Are there any children listening?
No.
Yeah, the blues show. I've met a number of my musical heroes who were giants to me and are. 1977, Foghat did a tribute to the blues in New York City at the Palladium. I got to play. We were the house band for Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, Johnny Winter, Paul Butterfield, Eddie Bluesman Kirkland, who actually played on one of our records with us, and we backed him on a number of other shows. Playing with, meeting Willie Dixon in Chicago, meeting his children, going to Willie Dixon's house and having dinner with him and sitting there and just sitting next to this giant of a music man, where there would be no rock and roll if it wasn't for people like Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters. And that's the joy of playing music, and the joy for me that I got to meet and play with my musical heroes. And you know what? None of them let me down. They just shone like these musical beacons. And I was like, the reason you get into music is because you're a fan. You're a fan of music, and you're a fan of certain artists. And that's the reason you play, because you're a fan. That's the reason you have this driving ambition to play and want to do it, because you are a fan. You're a fan of music. You're a fan. And I get a fantastic kick out of playing, and the same with, I got to meet my heroes and play with them. I am rich because of those encounters.
That was awesome, man. I want to thank you for coming on, Roger. People, the album, because when this airs, the album will be already out. The album is Sonic Mojo. Go buy it. Go to their website, foghat.com. There's some great shows coming up. Go check them out live. They will not let you down. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 980 episodes there. Email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.